environment and development go together. I welcome Mr. Ashish Kothari to.
The first part of this presentation will be the bad news. So that's the depressing part, which is really about the impacts that modern form of development and especially globalized development has had in India. And the second part is the good news, which is where people are trying to respond to that in both resistance and also positive, constructive ways, trying to develop new forms of well-being which don't cause the problems that I talked about in the first part. So India's growth story has been very impressive, especially in the last 25 years. And some of the indicators are it is now one of the world's 10 biggest economies. It has had very rapid growth for certain parts of these last 2 decades. We're supposed to be proud that 5 of the 10 richest people in the world are Indians or former Indians. And number of mobile phones, etc. I mean, you can count different indicators for what people say is the rapid progress that India is making. But if you look at the impacts of this advertisement captures it very nicely. It's an Indian multinational corporation which essentially, I won't read out the text here, but essentially it says that nature is a barrier towards development. And in order to develop, like laying a pipeline, you have to rip through jungles in Indonesia, move the earth in India, etc., etc. So the mindset of development is that we want material, physical progress, financial, monetary progress, and anything that stands in the way, whether it is nature or it is communities and culture, that has to be swept aside. So it's a form of violence. But development today is a form of violence. Some indications of that, of course, are the kind of loss of the ecological loss that we've faced in the last few decades. These are some statistics. I'm not going to bore you with statistics, but it's interesting to look at the extent of destruction that has taken place of natural ecosystems, human habitat, agricultural biodiversity, and so on and so forth. A lot of this may or may not be relevant to Ladakh in particular, but I think many things are. I mean, for instance, we're learning that domesticated by a lot of the local crops in Ladakh are also losing out because of cheap rice coming in, wheat coming in. So this is one indication of the kind of impacts. Agriculture, in fact, has been one of the most seriously affected sectors in India due to this process. And again, we're not going into too much detail, but if you look at it, agriculture, especially small-scale agriculture or mountain agriculture or shifting agriculture or dryland agriculture, are all in very serious crisis. And I guess the most serious, the most dramatic indication of that is the number of suicides that are being committed by farmers, including in the areas where the government has implemented the Green Revolution. Okay, so clearly there's something very seriously wrong with this model of agriculture, which attempts to keep increasing food grains production, which of course is necessary, but it does it in a way that both the land and the biodiversity and small-scale farming and other kinds of farming are actually losing out. It's only the big farmers who may be benefiting, and of course people like us in cities who have the grains easily and cheaply to be able to consume. Now, it's often said that countries like India need to go through this process. We need to not worry about the environment and culture and things like that, because we have to develop. We have to develop. Why? Because there are lots of people who are poor, they don't have enough to eat, etc. And development is necessary to move people out of poverty, create jobs, give housing, sanitation, etc. So we've done a detailed study in a book that we published, my co-author and I, 3 years back. Unfortunately, my co-author is stuck in Srinagar, or somewhere between Srinagar and here, I'm not sure. He was supposed to be here yesterday. There is a copy of the book in case anybody wants to see it here. And so what we looked at is to see, is that real, that people are actually substantially moving out of poverty and getting housing, etc. And then at some point we'll worry about the environment. Or is there something problematic in this theory? So let's take a look at some of the facts on this. Jobs. So it is said that this form of development will actually create lots more jobs. The truth of the matter is, just 2 months back, the government of India itself admitted that there is 20% unemployment in India, India's youth. Average unemployment is about 12, 13, 14%, but with the youth it's 20%, and it's increasing. Why? Because most of the money is actually going into the organized sector, like IT industry, automobiles, this kind of government, etc., which actually employs a very small section of India's population, and even in that, there is no substantial growth in jobs. The big reason for that, of course, is that all sectors are getting mechanized. Okay, so people are actually, that many people that are getting jobs, the same amount, or virtually the same amount, are actually losing jobs. A good example of that is Tata company, steel production in Jamshedpur. They now produce about 5 times more steel than they did 25 years back, with 1/3 the workforce. Okay, so 2/3 have actually been laid off, which of course means that Tatas are earning much more profits, but people are not getting employment in that. If you look at poverty line, if you take poverty not just in terms of the money income, the $1.25 rate kind of thing, World Bank kind of definition, but you look at it in terms of deprivation from basic needs: water, clean water, adequate nutritious food, clean air, learning facilities, health facilities, sanitation, housing, etc., then according to us, at least 70% of India is still poor. And in fact, the latest government figures show that 66% of India's rural population is in the deprived category. So that's official statistics that even the government is admitting now. And of course, we have other indicators like health, where we should be proud that we have the world's largest number of malnourished or undernourished women and children. Interestingly enough, Mr. Modi, who is shown there with his 12 lakh rupee jacket, in his Gujarat, during his 3 terms as chief minister, the percentage of children who were stunted, which means that there was not enough nourishment during, after they were born, went down from 42% of Gujarat's children to 40% of Gujarat's children. Virtually no difference, despite very rapid rate of economic growth in Gujarat. So that whole model that he has now brought into the center is seriously faulty. So, and then of course there is also cultural and social erosion. Now I have taken the liberty of picking up a few things from the Ladakh vision document, which I think has some very good things in it, possibly because of the contributions of people like Wangchuk Le and Sonam Dawale and others. So here is what they talk about Ladakh, but it's something that's true for all of India. It seems that somewhere along the way, the importance of social and cultural values has been forgotten. Ladakh is not an exception to this development. Though connected to the outside world only 40 years back, it has already shed much of its traditional wisdom and cultural heritage. A similar story in India. Now, one is not therefore saying that all of tradition was good. There were many problematic parts of Indian tradition. But there was a lot that was good, and we're very rapidly losing it. We're changing, cultures are changing and becoming very confused all across the country. And my last slide, I'm going to come back to this issue of values. So let's just keep this in mind. Next. Okay, but then where is all the money that is generated by this growth going? And here's a very interesting recent statistic, I think from last year, that 1% of India, which includes at least some of the Indians sitting in this room, own 50% of its wealth, the private, not government properties, but private. If you take the top 10%, the richest 10%, that's about 70% of India's wealth. And this is increased. This inequality is actually increased over the last 2 or 3 decades. It's not decreasing. This is not just an Indian phenomenon; it's a global phenomenon. Anybody here from the US? Many from the US, right? Yeah, I think your statistics are worse. Yeah, but we're coming in your direction, so soon you can welcome us in the same. Okay. Next. Right. One of the phenomenon that actually underlies this is the overconsumption by the rich. Now, India often hides itself in terms of, if you take, for instance, the climate change debate. India says our per capita carbon emissions are very low compared to say the US and so on, China and so on, which is true. But what that is doing is actually it's hiding behind the poor. Because the poor poor are emitting so little carbon that they hide the incredible amounts of carbon emissions by our rich people. It's the same as between India and the US, the same within India between the poor and the rich. And you can see that. If you look at consumption patterns, I come from Pune, and now in the last 10 years or so, I think we've got a shopping mall in virtually every third or fourth street. And the same thing is happening in all cities. And that consumption level is one part of a very, very deep rooted part of the problem. So if we put all of this together, to me and to a lot of other people, it seems very clear that we need a very drastic shift. We can't simply be talking about tinkering within the system. We need to actually fundamentally change the way we're doing things, the way we're relating to the earth, the way we're relating to each other, the way we think of progress, prosperity, and so on. And again, taking from the Ladakh Vision document, talking about Ladakh, but it could be for anywhere in India. Rapid decline in this region's resources, natural, social, cultural, have witnessed in the recent past. The need of the hour is to bring immediate stop to this shocking deterioration by developing an appropriate set of preventive measures. And the Chief Executive Councillor, in fact, of the Hill Council has also said that let's make sure that progress in Ladakh means overall well-being of humans and nature, and not just a blind rush for material development. Nice. I mean, I think this kind of somewhat captures the need for this shift.